The morning light poured through my kitchen windows as I flipped the last cinnamon waffle onto the stack. This breakfast was my peace, offering a reminder of simpler times when my son Elijah was just a boy with syrup on his chin. "Grandma, can I have more juice?" asked Theo, my 10-year-old grandson, his dark curls falling across his forehead. I reached for his glass. "Of course, sweetheart." The kitchen smelled like weekend mornings from years ago. I'd woken early, driven across town, and let myself in with the spare key to surprise them. The way Elijah's eyes lit up when he came downstairs made me think it was worth it. Until it wasn't. Theo's hand shot out as I leaned down with his juice. The slap landed hard across my cheek, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. My hand froze mid-air. The juice sloshed, spilling cold orange drops onto the floor. Elijah laughed. Not a shocked laugh. A real one. Deep and familiar. "He's only playing, Mom," he said between chuckles. "Don't look so dramatic." My daughter-in-law Vanessa glanced up from her phone, her eyes flat and unconcerned. "You're making it a big deal," she said, scrolling with her thumb. Then she met my gaze and added, "Go." Just that. One word. Theo was smirking now, looking to his father for approval. Finding it. I set the juice down carefully, hands steady despite the tremor I felt inside. The sting spread across my skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill that settled in my chest. "I should head home," I whispered, though no one seemed to be listening. I gathered my purse while Elijah and Vanessa returned to their breakfast. Theo kicked his legs under the table, already bored with the moment. Outside, I started my car with shaking hands. The morning sun felt colder now. I didn't cry until I reached the stop sign at the end of their street. I didn't feel the sting on my cheek. I felt it in my chest. That's where it landed. I drove away from their house that morning, not realizing I was driving out of their lives. 21 days. 3 weeks since anyone from my son's family had called. I watered my peace lily by the window, counting drops. 1, 2, 3. The house creaked around me, settling into afternoon stillness. My phone sat silent on the counter, screen dark. I checked it anyway, wiping away a fingerprint with my sleeve. "You're being silly, Eleanor," I told myself. "They're busy." But the words rang hollow in the empty kitchen. I folded laundry that didn't need folding, reorganized spices alphabetically, anything to keep my hands from reaching for the phone to call them. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, a heartbeat for a house that felt increasingly lifeless. Tick, tick, tick. At lunch, I set 2 plates out of habit before sliding one back into the cabinet. The sound echoed. There's a strange kind of grief that comes from being alive but unnecessary. Every day at 4:30, I checked the mail. Bills, flyers. Nothing with Elijah's handwriting or Theo's school picture. I found myself retracing the morning in my mind. The slap, the laugh, that word, "go." Had I overreacted? Should I have laughed too? No. Something had broken that morning. Something important. The following Tuesday, my neighbor Patricia stopped by with blueberry muffins. "Haven't seen that grandson of yours around lately," she said, settling at my kitchen table. "He always runs through my flower beds." I forced a smile. "They're busy with soccer season." The lie tasted bitter. There was no soccer season in November. When Patricia left, silence rushed back in like a tide. I found myself turning on the TV just to hear voices. My wedding photo watched from the mantel. Thomas had been gone 3 years now. "What would you tell me to do?" I asked, his frozen smile. The next morning, I drove past Elijah's house on my way to the grocery store. Their cars were there. Lights on. Life continuing. I kept driving. That night, I realized I'd become a ghost in their story. A faded character, easily. I've forgotten. I used to be the center of their mornings. Now, I'm the echo at the edge of theirs. The attic was stuffy, dust dancing in the beam of my flashlight. I hadn't been up here since Thomas died. His presence lingered among labeled boxes and old furniture. I found what I needed in the third filing cabinet. Business papers, written in Thomas's neat block letters. Back downstairs, I spread the documents across my dining table. Property deeds, business investments, loan agreements, all co-signed by me, with Elijah's name appearing throughout. The revelation was simple but shocking. I still controlled half of everything. When Thomas died, we never formally transferred ownership. The family business, the hardware store that had put Elijah through college and paid for their house, was still partially mine. I made tea and sat with this knowledge as rain tapped against the windows. For years, I'd stepped aside. Let Elijah handle it, Thomas had said before he passed. He's a good businessman. But was he a good son? I remembered how easily he'd laughed at his son's behavior. How that laughter would teach Theo that hurting others was acceptable. Funny, even. My hands trembled slightly as I sorted the papers into neat piles. After midnight, I opened my laptop. The light illuminated my face as I logged into accounts I hadn't touched in years. Password recovery emails. Security questions about Thomas's birthplace and our anniversary. By 3 a.m., I had a complete picture. The business was struggling. Elijah had taken out a second mortgage. There were credit card bills and loans against inventory. This wasn't about money. It was about responsibility. It wasn't anger that guided my hand. It was clarity. I'd raised Elijah to be better than this. Where had I gone wrong? When had laughter at others' pain become acceptable? Morning found me still at the table, my decision made. I would use what power I had left, not for revenge, but for correction. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years. Samuel Wilson, Thomas's attorney. My finger hovered over the call button. The house was quiet except for the clock's persistent ticking. Tick, tick, tick. I pressed call. The dial tone hummed against my ear. It wasn't too late to hang up, to pretend none of this had happened, to accept being unnecessary. But then I remembered Theo's smirk after he slapped me. The seed of cruelty being watered by his father's approval. The line connected. Law offices of Wilson and Partners. A voice answered. I took a deep breath. Elijah's kitchen hadn't changed. Same granite countertops. Same stainless steel appliances. Same table where my cheek had stung 3 weeks ago. But something was different. The energy, perhaps. Vanessa paced near the sink, phone pressed to her ear. Elijah sat hunched over a letter, coffee cooling beside him. I don't care what the policy is, Vanessa hissed into her phone. My son is not violent. I stood in the doorway, invisible for a moment. Elijah had called me in a panic. Mom, can you come over? It's about Theo. When Elijah finally noticed me, he looked smaller somehow. Like he'd aged years in weeks. Mom, he said, voice cracking. He slid the letter across the table. The school's letterhead stared up at me. Bold words jumped out. Suspension and physical assault and zero tolerance. Theo had slapped his teacher, Miss Patel, when she tried to take away his phone during math. He laughed afterward, Elijah whispered, eyes fixed on the letter. Like it was funny. God, Mom, where would he learn that? The irony sat heavy between us. I said nothing. Vanessa hung up and turned to me, her eyes lacking their usual sharpness. They want us to bring him to counseling, she said, voice flat, like there's something wrong with him. And is there? I asked quietly. Elijah's coffee cup slipped from his hand. The dark liquid spread across the table, dripping onto his lap. He didn't move to clean it. He said. Elijah's voice broke. He told the principal that I laugh when he does things like that it's okay at home. Vanessa leaned against the counter, suddenly looking exhausted. We've been fighting, she admitted. About money. About everything. Theo hears it all? I nodded, saying nothing. This wasn't about me anymore. The business is in trouble, Elijah said, looking up finally. Dad made it look so easy. Before I could respond, Elijah's phone rang on the table. The screen showed school in bold letters. Karma doesn't knock, it sends letters and makes phone calls. Elijah stared at his buzzing phone, hand frozen above the spreading coffee. Are you going to answer that? I asked. Mom, something happened with Theo at school today. Elijah's voice cracked over the phone. I sat in my living room, already knowing. The school had called me 30 minutes earlier. I was still listed as Theo's emergency contact, a fact Elijah had apparently forgotten. Miss Patel told me, I said quietly. Silence stretched between us, full of unspoken questions. Why did they call you? He finally asked, confusion edging his words. I'm his emergency contact. Second after you and Vanessa. Another pause. I could hear him breathing, gathering courage perhaps. I didn't know what to say to him, Mom. His voice sounded raw, young again. He slapped his teacher, and then laughed. Just like, he stopped himself. But we both knew how that sentence ended. Just like when he slapped me. Where is Theo now? I asked. In his room. The school sent him home for the week. Vanessa's furious with the principal, says they're overreacting. I waited, letting silence do its work. But they're not, are they? Elijah continued softly. Overreacting. The afternoon light shifted through my curtains. The same clock that had kept me company through lonely weeks ticked steadily. No, I answered. They're not. Vanessa moved out last night. He confessed suddenly. Said she needed space. The business is failing, Mom. Everything's falling apart. I closed my eyes, surprised by the lack of satisfaction I felt. There was only sadness. What did Theo say? I asked. After it happened? Elijah's breath caught. That's the worst part. He told Miss Patel, my dad thinks it's funny when I do that. The words hung between us, a mirror held up to show the ugly truth. I laughed, Mom. When he slapped you, I laughed. He didn't say sorry, but his silence did. I could hear muffled sounds in the background, a door opening, small footsteps. Dad? Theo's voice came through, distant but clear. Is that Grandma? A rustling noise, then Elijah again. He wants to talk to you. My heart quickened. Put him on. More rustling, then a small voice, suddenly uncertain. Grandma? Before I could answer, the sound of Theo broke through. Not words, but laughter. The same laugh I'd heard from Elijah, now echoing in his son. A cold feeling washed over me. Theo, why are you laughing? I asked. His answer would change everything. The phone rang at 8:17 p.m., unknown number. Mrs. Bennett? This is Priya Patel, Theo's math teacher. I sank into my armchair, gripping the phone tighter. Miss Patel? Yes. Her voice was soft, but firm. Professional, despite what had happened. I wanted to speak with you directly. The school gave me your number as an emergency contact. The clock ticked in the background as I waited. Theo's a bright boy, she continued, gifted with numbers. But something's troubling him deeply. I closed my eyes, picturing a classroom, a sudden slap, shocked faces. He's not the first child to act out, Miss Patel said. But his reaction afterward concerned me more than the slap itself. The laughter, I whispered. Yes. A pause. He told me something during our talk with the counselor. Something I think you should know. The streetlight outside my window flickered, casting moving shadows across my living room floor. He's not a bad child, she said. He's just confused about what love looks like. My throat tightened. He said he did it because that's how his dad laughs when he does. That his mom says it's just playing. The words hung in the air. Confirmation of what I'd feared. Cruelty wasn't born in Theo. It was taught. I've seen this pattern before. Miss Patel continued. Children don't invent cruelty. They learn it. I thanked her for calling, promised to help however I could. After hanging up, I sat motionless, watching the streetlight's glow shift across my hands. By morning, the first pale rays of dawn streaked through my curtains. I hadn't slept. Instead, I'd made a decision. On my kitchen table lay a blank sheet of paper and a pen. The clock read 6:03 a.m. I began to write, each word careful and measured. Not to my son, but to my grandson. The boy who'd slapped me wasn't the villain in this story. He was another victim. As the sun rose fully, casting my kitchen in gold, I sealed the letter in an envelope and wrote Theo across the front. What I didn't write was that I'd made another call after Miss Patel's to Samuel Wilson. The papers would be ready tomorrow. Sometimes love means making hard choices. The question was, would anyone understand why I made them? Dear Theo, I still remember the day you were born. Your father cried. Real tears, not the empty kind. He held you like you were made of glass and promised to be the dad his own father sometimes wasn't. Did you know your dad used to rescue frogs from our pool? He'd scoop them up with the net and carry them to the pond down the street. They'll die if I leave them, Mom, he'd say. He was right. When you were 4, you fell at the park and scraped your knee. Your dad didn't tell you to stop crying. He sat with you until the tears stopped naturally. I was so proud of him then. Something changed, Theo. Not overnight. Slowly, like water wearing down stone. Your grandfather worked hard. Too hard sometimes. He expected your dad to be perfect, to never show weakness. When your dad took over the store, I think he carried those expectations with him. The first time I saw him laugh at someone's pain, I should have spoken up. I didn't. That's on me. But here's what matters now. You can be the first to stop the cycle. When someone falls, you can help them up instead of laughing. When you make a mistake, you can fix it instead of blaming others. Being strong isn't about never feeling hurt, it's about how you respond to hurting others. I keep thinking about that morning in your kitchen. I keep wondering if you saw my face after the slap. If you understood what happened in that moment. Your dad learned that laughter from somewhere. Not from me. Not from your grandfather. But somewhere along the way, it became his response. Then it became yours. It doesn't have to stay that way. There's a frog pond near my house now. Come visit sometime. We can talk about your dad when he was young. About the boy he was before he forgot how to be kind. I love you. Not because you're perfect, but because you don't have to be. All my love. Grandma, I read the letter twice more before sealing it. No accusations. No guilt. Just truth and hope. The mailbox at the corner stood waiting in morning light. I walked slowly, the letter heavy in my hand. A young couple passed, holding hands. A woman walked her dog. Normal moments in normal lives. I slid the letter through the slot and lifted the red flag. Now it was up to fate. Up to Theo. The mail truck would come by noon. The letter would reach him tomorrow. I walked home, feeling lighter somehow. The sky seemed bluer, the air clearer. By the time I reached my front door, my phone was ringing inside. The doorbell rang 3 days later. I set down my teacup and smoothed my skirt, heart racing. Through the peephole, I saw Theo, shoulders hunched, staring at his sneakers. Behind him stood Elijah, hands in pockets, looking thinner than before. I opened the door. Silence stretched between us. Grandma, Theo whispered. Eyes, red-rimmed. He clutched my letter, edges worn from repeated folding. Hello, sweetheart. He lunged forward suddenly, arms wrapping around my waist. His face pressed against my cardigan. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm really sorry. I held him close, feeling his small body shake with tears. Over his head, I met Elijah's gaze. My son's eyes were hollow, haunted. Can we come in? He asked quietly. In the living room, Theo sat beside me on the sofa, unwilling to move from my side. Elijah took the armchair, perched on its edge like he might flee at any moment. Vanessa left, he said finally. For good this time. Signed divorce papers yesterday. Theo sniffled beside me. I squeezed his shoulder. The store's failing, Elijah continued. I took out loans I can't repay. Dad would be so disappointed. No, I said firmly. He wouldn't be. Elijah looked up, surprised. He'd be disappointed in how you've treated people, not in business troubles. Businesses can be rebuilt. Theo pulled away slightly, looking up at me. Dad said we have to sell our house. Elijah winced. I was going to ease into that part. Where will you go? I asked. I don't know, Elijah admitted. I've messed everything up, Mom. In that moment, he finally looked like the boy I raised, scared, honest, human. We had a long talk, Elijah said, nodding toward Theo. About what happened. About why it happened. And? I prompted. And I don't want to be that person anymore, Theo said, his voice small but determined. I don't want to be like. He stopped, glancing at his father. Like me, Elijah finished. He doesn't want to be like me. The truth hung raw between us. I want to come live with you, Theo blurted suddenly. Dad said maybe I could stay here sometimes, while he figures things out. I looked at Elijah, questioning. I need help, Mom, he whispered. I need to learn how to be better. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle drops against the windows. The three of us sat in silence as afternoon faded to evening. None of us knew yet that everything was about to change again. The mantel clock chimed 6 times. Dinner time. Are you hungry? I asked them both. Theo nodded eagerly, but Elijah hesitated. Before we eat, he said, reaching into his jacket, there's something else you should see. Elijah pulled out a wrinkled envelope. The bank sent this to the store yesterday. I took it, already knowing what it contained. Someone bought the second mortgage on the property, Elijah explained, voice tight. They could foreclose any time. I opened the envelope slowly, skimming the legal language while Theo watched curiously. Who would do this? Elijah asked. Buy a failing loan? I set the papers on the coffee table between us. I did. The shock on his face would have been comical under different circumstances. You? Elijah stammered. How? Why? I'd planned for this moment differently, papers signed in lawyers' offices, formal transfers of property. Not here. In my living room. With Theo listening wide-eyed. Your father left his half of everything to me, not you. I explained gently. We never changed the arrangements after he died. Elijah's face drained of color. So all this time, I've been watching you struggle without saying anything. That was wrong of me. Theo looked between us, confused. What does it mean, Dad? Elijah couldn't answer. He stared at me like I'd become a stranger. It means, I said carefully, that I can help fix things. What I didn't tell them was the rest of my plan. That 3 days ago, I'd changed my will. That everything, the store, the property, my house would one day belong to Theo, not out of spite, but out of faith. I didn't take revenge. I built redemption. I don't understand, Elijah said. You could have taken everything back any time? Yes. Why didn't you? I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw both the man he'd become and the boy he'd been. Because you needed to find your way, back on your own. That night, after a quiet dinner of soup and sandwiches, Elijah helped wash dishes while Theo showered upstairs. My guest room would be his for the weekend. I don't deserve your help, Elijah murmured, drying a bowl. This isn't about deserving, I replied. It's about choosing to be better. After they went to bed, I opened my desk drawer and removed another envelope thicker, sealed with the law firm's emblem. Inside lay Theo's future, protected from whatever storms might come. The grandfather clock chimed midnight as I labeled the envelope with his name and locked it in my safe. Tomorrow would bring questions, hard conversations, the beginning of rebuilding. But tonight, listening to their quiet breathing upstairs, I allowed myself to hope. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Who would visit at midnight? Christmas morning arrived with snow, the first white Christmas in years. The smell of cinnamon waffles filled the kitchen as I flipped the last one onto the stack, just like that morning months ago, but everything had changed. Grandma, can I pour the syrup? Theo called from the dining room, where he'd set the table without being asked. Of course, I answered, carrying the plate in. Elijah appeared from the guest room, his room now, until the apartment above the store was renovated. 3 months living together had smoothed the rough edges between us. The midnight visitor that night had been Vanessa, drunk and angry, demanding to see Theo. Instead, she found clarity in my quiet kitchen. She'd left for her sisters in Oregon the next day, signing full custody over to Elijah. Merry Christmas, Elijah said, kissing my cheek. We sat together, passing plates and butter, the silence comfortable now. I have presents, Theo announced after breakfast, disappearing into his room. He returned with crudely wrapped packages. For Elijah, a framed photo of the three of them from happier times. His father stared at it, blinking rapidly. For me, a small handmade bracelet, crafted from colored string. The beads spelled out, "Sorry, Grandma." "It's perfect," I whispered, letting him tie it around my wrist. "I made it at school," he explained. Miss Patel helped. The mention of his teacher, now back to being just his teacher, not the woman he'd struck, came easily. The counseling sessions had helped. So had the honest conversations about anger, about consequences, about better ways. "I have something for both of you too," I said. I handed Elijah an envelope containing keys to the apartment above the store. "It'll be ready next month." For Theo, a smaller envelope holding a certificate for weekend woodworking classes with Mr. Rivera, who ran the workshop behind the hardware store. "You're giving me a job?" Theo asked, eyes wide. "An apprenticeship," I corrected. "Every Saturday. Your dad did the same at your age." Elijah stared at the keys in his palm. "Mom, I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," I said simply. "Every day." Through the window, I watched snow continue to fall. The clock on the mantel, the one that had kept time through my loneliest days, ticked steadily on. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It rewrites it. Later, as Elijah and Theo built a snowman in the front yard, I watched from the porch, the bracelet bright against my wrist. 6 months ago, a slap had shattered my world. Now, new foundations were being built on the ruins. Next weekend, we would all visit the store together. Elijah would train the new cashier. Theo would sort inventory with Mr. Rivera. I would mind the register sometimes, when I felt like it. Life moving forward, differently than before. Better, perhaps. The boy who slapped me once now holds my hand every Sunday. Sometimes, love just needs to be taught twice. Theo waved from the yard, face flushed with cold and happiness. I waved back, unaware that the most difficult test of our healing was still to come.